Welcome to today's Explainer. I'll be your professor today, and we're going to dive right into an absolute masterclass on cause and effect. The ultimate underdog story, really. We're talking about the founding of the United States. We're going to look closely at how a series of political disagreements over, of all things, revenue, completely shattered an empire. We'll trace this wild timeline, from those initial protests in the streets to the explosive battles, right through to the sheer tactical genius that actually secured American independence. Okay, let's take a quick look at the syllabus for today. We're going to track how a tax dispute spiraled into a world-altering war, covering the prelude to rebellion, erupting in battle, defending the Declaration, war on multiple fronts, and ending with the final victory. All right, first up, prelude to rebellion. We're kicking off our lecture right between 1754 and 1776. This period was heavily defined by a massively expensive land conflict known as the French and Indian War, and it left behind some truly crippling debt for the British. So, to replenish their coffers, the British government decided that the 13 American colonies needed to foot the bill. Now, what's literally wild about this period is the sheer speed of the escalation. It's a rapid chain of cause and effect. The British passed taxes like the Stamp Act of 1765 and the Townshend Acts to recoup funds. You even have Benjamin Franklin testifying before Parliament, pleading that the colonies had already done enough, but the taxes came anyway. This triggered major unrest, like the seizure of John Hancock's sloop the Liberty, and it ultimately culminated in the Boston Massacre in 1770. Unruly protesters were throwing snowballs at soldiers guarding the custom house, and without a direct order, those soldiers fired, and 5 men died. Patriots like Samuel Adams used this to fan the flames, which led straight into the Tea Act of 1773. Picture this scene in Boston on December 16, 1773. The British East India Company is desperately trying to force its taxed tea onto the colonies. After 3 weeks of incredibly volatile standoffs and a massive town meeting that spilled all the way from Faneuil Hall over to the Old South Meeting House, the tension finally snaps. The Sons of Liberty, loosely disguised as Mohawk Indians, storm Griffin's Wharf. They climb aboard 3 ships and hurl exactly 340 chests of cursed tea right into the harbor. So, how did the British react? Well, as you'd guess, they were furious. They slammed down the coercive acts, or as the colonists called them, the intolerable acts. The intent was to isolate and punish Massachusetts. But, history is just full of unintended consequences. Instead of breaking Boston's spirit, the severity of these acts completely shifted the momentum. It practically forced the other colonies to unite in defense of Massachusetts. As this push for independence spread like wildfire, fueled by this brand new unity, it found its voice in some incredibly powerful rhetoric. Alongside influential writings like Thomas Paine's famous pamphlet Common Sense, we get this iconic speech delivered in the Virginia House of Burgess. It perfectly captures the shifting psychology of the colonists. The stakes, they were no longer just about taxes. They were about fundamental freedom. Moving on to Section 2, Erupting in Battle. Let's look at how this rhetoric turned into open conflict. The British monarch had officially had enough, declaring Massachusetts to be in a state of rebellion and ordering American patriots to be disarmed. The political debate was over, folks. The military struggle had begun. Look at how fast things are moving in 1775. After Paul Revere and William Dawes spread the alarm from the Old North Church, Minutemen engaged the British at Lexington Green. Captain John Parker famously declared, "If they mean to have a war, let it begin here," giving us the legendary shot heard round the world. Within just a matter of months, these little local skirmishes morphed into a full-scale war. By July, George Washington had taken command of the newly formed Continental Army on the Cambridge Common. Actually, right before Washington took charge, the colonists fortified Bunker Hill in June of 1775. During this incredibly intense assault by British forces, the Continental soldiers, who were severely low on supplies, were steadied with this chilling, famous order. Now, while a sheer lack of ammunition eventually forced the colonists to withdraw, losing key figures like Dr. Joseph Warren along the way, this fierce resistance proved something vital. It proved the colonists could stand toe-to-toe with the world's most powerful military. And this next move? This is pure tactical genius. The Patriots didn't just rely on grit, they relied on brilliant logistics. Benedict Arnold and Ethan Allen captured these massive cannons up at Fort Ticonderoga. They then dragged those heavy weapons overland in a grueling journey to emplacements on Dorchester Heights. Once those cannons were pointed down at the city, Boston became utterly impenetrable for the British, forcing them to completely evacuate. All right, Section 3, Defending the Declaration. With the British out of Boston, the political leaders of the colonies took a monumental, permanent step forward in the summer of 1776. This wasn't just a rebellion anymore. It was transforming into a brand new nation. So, following a motion by Richard Henry Lee earlier in June, a committee was formed to explain the exact reasons for separating from Britain. The newly minted United States of America officially separated from the empire on paper. But as any historian will quickly tell you, writing a declaration is one thing. Actually defending that paper declaration in the grueling fields of battle, that would immediately test the Continental Army. And man, did it test them. Facing severe hardships and crushing defeats in New York, morale was absolutely plummeting. But Washington understood the power of ideas. Right before crossing the icy Delaware River on Christmas night 1776 to launch a desperate, daring attack on Trenton, his troops listened to the words of Thomas Paine's The Crisis. Paine wrote that the summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will in this crisis shrink from the service of his country, but he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. The troops drew immense inspiration from that stirring prose. This whole sequence is basically a masterclass in resilience and statecraft. That daring victory at Trenton restored crucial confidence. Then, despite enduring a horrific winter encampment at Valley Forge, the army didn't break. Instead, under the highly skillful direction of Baron Friedrich von Steuben, they drilled and trained, emerging as a truly effective fighting force. And meanwhile, across the ocean, Benjamin Franklin successfully negotiated a monumental alliance with France, securing the monetary and military aid that would completely change the course of the war. Which brings us to Section 4, War on Multiple Fronts. After the British evacuated Philadelphia in June of 1778, the theater of war expanded dramatically. This was no longer just a New England conflict. It exploded across entirely different geographic arenas. You've got this fascinating split here between two new theaters. Down south, the British really hoped loyalists would rally to the crown. But on land, Continental leaders like Nathaniel Greene and the legendary swamp fox Francis Marion waged a brilliant guerrilla war. They won crucial battles at Kings Mountain and Cowpens, which kept Loyalists at bay and essentially forced British General Cornwallis northward. Meanwhile, a fledgling American Navy, which relied heavily on privateers, took the fight directly to the brutal, chaotic theater of the open seas. Speaking of the sea, we literally can't skip this incredible moment. During a massive, fierce battle between his ship, the Bonaham Richard, and the heavily armed British warship Serapis, Captain John Paul Jones was asked if he intended to surrender his floundering, heavily damaged vessel. He cemented the defiant spirit of the newly formed American Navy with his legendary, stubborn response. Okay, final chapter, Section 5, the final victory. By 1780, the chess pieces were finally moving into place for a decisive showdown. With a 5,500-man French expeditionary force arriving in Rhode Island, General Washington saw an incredible opportunity to trap British General Cornwallis down in Virginia. Just look at the sheer coordination of Washington's master plan at Yorktown. It's like a giant puzzle coming together perfectly. He feigns an attack on New York to distract the British. This allows the French troops under Rochambeau to secretly march south and join the Continentals. These combined forces then link up with the Marquis de Lafayette in Virginia. But the trap only works because of the water. French naval forces under Comte de Grasse defeat the British relief fleet at the Battle of the Chesapeake, completely blockading Cornwallis from the sea. So Cornwallis is completely boxed in. Stripped of his naval escape route and surrounded by Allied forces on land, he was trapped in the Tidewater region. The siege of Yorktown left him absolutely no choice. He surrendered his army in October 1781. This catastrophic loss ultimately convinced the British government that the war was simply unwinnable. They negotiated an end to the conflict, signing the Treaty of Paris in 1783 and officially recognizing the United States of America as an independent nation. As we wrap up today's explainer, I really want you to reflect on this extraordinary chain of events. A local dispute over the price of tea and tax stamps systematically escalated into the birth of a nation, driven by sheer resilience, brilliant alliances, and a deep-seated desire for self-determination. Consider how the defiant, enduring spirit of this revolution, that refusal to surrender even when the ship is sinking, still echoes in our modern world and continues to shape the very definition of liberty today. Keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.